You walk across a quiet hill in southern Turkey, and everything looks perfectly ordinary. Grass grows on top of a rounded mound of earth and loose stones. Nothing about the landscape screams that you are standing on top of an ancient wonder. You probably think ancient ruins simply disappear because time buries them. You imagine centuries passing while wind blows dust and rain washes soil down hillsides, slowly covering the past little by little. That picture feels natural, and it feels logical. But if you could stand on this specific mound, known as Göbekli Tepe, and scrape away the soil with your hands, you would discover something completely strange. This hill is not natural at all. It is one of the strangest human projects ever built, and it was constructed entirely on purpose. Right now, hidden beneath your feet, sits a massive complex of stone circles built more than 11,000 years ago. When archaeologists first arrived and uncovered 4 huge stone circles, they thought they had found the heart of the site. Each excavated circle held massive limestone pillars carved with animals. But those 4 circles were just the beginning. Ground-penetrating radar and geomagnetic tools scanned the mound from 2003 to 2012, sending signals into the soil to read what bounced back. The results changed the story completely. The machines revealed perfect circles buried everywhere across the hill. Not just 1 or 2, but at least 10 additional monumental enclosures, and likely around 20 in total. The hill itself covers about 22 acres, which is roughly the size of 16 football fields. From one edge to the other, it stretches about 300 meters across, rising about 15 meters above the surrounding land. Almost all of it still hides underground. You are looking at only a thin slice of what is actually there. If you picture your ancient ancestors from that time, you probably imagine small groups of hunter-gatherers struggling to survive. You picture simple tools, temporary camps, and people who could never produce giant monuments. Göbekli Tepe shatters that belief. These enclosures were built during the pre-pottery Neolithic period, between roughly 9600 and 8000 BCE. Agriculture had barely begun. Metal tools did not exist, and pottery had not yet appeared. Yet the people here carved massive limestone pillars shaped like giant T-forms. The shape almost resembles a human figure with outstretched arms, and some pillars even feature carved details like belts, cloth patterns, and hands meeting at the front. Many of these stones stand over 5 meters high and weigh several tons. They arranged about 12 pillars into a ring, with 2 taller pillars standing in the center. They covered the stone surfaces with deliberate art, cutting sharp lines into the rock to create images of foxes, snakes, birds, scorpions, and wild boars. The simple math of the underground scans leads to a staggering realization. With about 20 stone rings buried across the site, the mound likely holds roughly 260 pillars in total. 260 carved stone monuments, built thousands of years before the first cities. The sheer scale of the work requires you to rethink what humans were capable of doing 11 millennia ago. Quarrying limestone blocks right from the plateau beneath their feet, shaping them without metal, dragging them across the ground, and pulling them upright into prepared sockets demanded massive coordination. It required planning, labor, and cooperation from a wide social world. But the greatest shock of Göbekli Tepe is not how it was built. It is how it disappeared. When you think about ancient monuments, you expect the builders to protect them. You assume people want to keep their creations visible for as long as possible, leaving pyramids exposed and temples open to the sky. Humans build something important and then try to keep it standing. Your ancestors at Göbekli Tepe broke that rule. They did not abandon these towering stone rings to the wind and rain. They buried them on purpose. After an enclosure stood for some time, the community began carrying debris into it. They dumped baskets of limestone chips from carving, packed dirt, and broken stone tools between the pillars. They threw in bones from hunted animals and everyday household waste. Layer by layer, the rubble rose higher. The pillars slowly sank deeper into the fill until the open sky disappeared and the entire enclosure vanished beneath the debris. This was deliberate, careful work. They chose to seal those spaces. In some places, the fill reached 15 meters deep, creating a stack of debris taller than a 4-story building. The mound you see today exists strictly because humans created it through repeated acts of backfilling over centuries. Archaeologists call this kind of human-made hill a tell. But unlike most tells that grow, because people continuously build new houses on top of older collapsed ones, the debris here sits mostly inside the monuments themselves. Archaeologist Klaus Schmidt, who studied the site for many years, suggested this was a way of closing or killing a sacred space once it had served its purpose. In many cultures, objects connected with ritual are not discarded casually. They are buried when their role ends to mark a transition. Imagine the moment when a circle was about to disappear. The people who helped build it might have gathered nearby while the pillars still stood tall. Then the filling began, with basket after basket of rubble tipped into the space. Some enclosures appear to have been cleaned first, with roofs dismantled and sculptures placed near the pillars before the loads of dirt and bone arrived. By filling the enclosures, the builders removed them from daily use while unknowingly protecting them. They performed a farewell ceremony on a massive scale. Not everyone agrees on this purely ritual explanation. Some researchers argue that the debris inside the enclosures resembles midden material, which is basically ancient trash. If the fill includes food, remains, broken tools, and daily waste, perhaps it accumulated gradually as people lived nearby. Others point out that natural soil could have washed down the slopes over long periods, combining with small landslides to slowly fill the structures. Earthquakes may have shaken the region, adding to the collapse. Researchers connected to the German Archaeological Institute, including Lee Clare, note that while the fills are clearly human-made, they may also include material moved by natural forces. And yet, the pattern inside many enclosures still looks highly organized. Pieces of limestone appear together, and bones mix through the rubble in a way that signals deliberate deposition rather than natural sediment. Erosion usually sorts particles by size, with water separating heavy stones from lighter soil, but at Göbekli Tepe, the materials remain completely mixed. This mixture keeps the debate alive, suggesting a blend of intentional ritual, closing, and generations of accumulated life. Regardless of the exact mix, the earth acted like a shield, blocking sunlight, stopping erosion, and preventing damage to the delicate carvings. By erasing their masterpiece, they accidentally saved it for you. For decades, this incredible landscape was viewed purely as a sanctuary. You probably picture it as a strange, lonely place meant only for rituals, where priests walked through silent spaces and daily life happened somewhere else. Schmidt believed wandering hunter-gatherers traveled to the hill solely to build monuments and hold ceremonies before returning to distant camps. That theory flipped the traditional story of civilization, which always claimed that people settled down to farm first and only built large temples afterward. Göbekli Tepe suggested religion came before farming and faith created the first communities. The earliest massive stone circles, belonging to what archaeologists call layer 3, had no hearths for cooking, no storage pits, and no obvious signs of ordinary household living. It felt like a clean, simple picture of a sacred destination. But in October 2025, a new scan cracked that image wide open. For years, large parts of the mound were hidden under olive trees, their roots and trunks blocking detailed scanning of the slopes. Once the trees were cleared, researchers ran new geophysical surveys across areas no machine had examined before. Ground-penetrating radar sent pulses of energy into the soil to read the reflections of solid blocks. Magnetic surveys detected tiny disturbances caused by buried walls. LiDAR created precise maps of the surface. Together, they formed an underground X-ray of the hill. The waves bounced back from buried shapes, and those shapes stunned the team. They were not circular ceremonial structures. They were straight lines forming rooms with corners meeting at sharp angles. They were rectangles. That one shape carries a quiet shock because circular forms usually appear in ancient gathering spaces, allowing groups to face inward toward a shared center. Rectangles mean something entirely different. Rectangles are houses. Walls that meet at right angles divide space into smaller areas for specific activities. When researchers saw these rectangular outlines in the radar data, they realized they were likely looking at domestic architecture. Lead archaeologist Nekshmi Karul pointed out that these rectangular structures sit along the eastern and southern slopes, just outside the main ceremonial rings. Later modifications from a period called Layer 2 already showed buildings becoming smaller and more compact, but these new rectangles push the timeline of daily life even further. This discovery changes your understanding of how early humans lived. It means people did not only visit this hill, they likely stayed there. The boundary between sacred space and ordinary life was much thinner than modern people imagine. You can picture the community working inside the massive stone enclosures, gathering around towering pillars. Then, just a short walk away, someone sits beside a small rectangular building, grinding wild grain on a heavy stone slab while smoke drifts from a cooking fire. Grinding stones are heavy, and people do not carry them casually across long distances. They stay near places where food is prepared repeatedly. Your ancestors were experimenting with a completely new way of living, transitioning from wandering across landscapes to settling down in one place. Building massive monuments required them to return day after day, and that practical need for shelter close to the worksite likely anchored them to the land. From that slow shift, the first settled societies began to emerge. Göbekli Tepe does not stand alone in this shift. It is part of a broader regional landscape known today as the Taştepeler project. Multiple locations in southeastern Turkey contain similar early stone structures. A nearby site called Karahan Tepe also dates to the pre-pottery Neolithic period and features structures that mix daily life with ritual spaces. Buildings there connect ordinary rooms to carved stone features. Each of these sites adds another piece to the puzzle, and scientists study them together by comparing their architecture and carvings. This wider research shapes the excavation choices at Göbekli Tepe itself. If a nearby site reveals a new pattern, archaeologists adjust where they dig next, targeting areas like the southeast hollow where geophysical scans suggest something important waits below. The hill becomes part of a bigger story, read one careful chapter at a time. If this history is so completely revolutionary, you might wonder why archaeologists are not digging up the entire hill right now. The answer lies in the extreme fragility of the past. The moment you expose a 10,000-year-old stone to the air, its protection disappears. Rain falls directly on the pillars, seeping into tiny cracks. Heat expands the rock during the day, and cold shrinks it at night. Wind pushes sand against the delicate carvings. Even the tiny vibrations from visitors walking near the ancient structures travel through the soil and can loosen stones that survived perfectly intact for millennia. Once the protective soil comes out, the environment changes forever, and the history can never return exactly the same way. Because of this danger, excavation moves painfully slowly. Researchers are choosing patience over speed. Today, roughly 90 to 95% of Göbekli Tepe remains unexcavated. When one enclosure appears, work stops immediately so engineers can check stability, clean surfaces, and reinforce weak spots. Large protective canopies made of metal and fabric are built over the exposed pits to shield the ancient pillars from the weather. The site operates under strict protection rules tied to its UNESCO World Heritage status. Teams from Istanbul University and the German Archaeological Institute map every detail before moving a single centimeter of dirt. They photograph and measure every line carved into the limestone so the knowledge survives even if natural erosion eventually damages the stone. The process is so slow that full excavation could take around 150 years. The archaeologists working there today know they will never see the entire site uncovered in their lifetimes. They are intentionally leaving large sections of the mound backfilled, trusting that future scientists will have better tools and improved preservation methods. Leaving parts of the mound buried keeps those options open. It is like discovering a masterpiece, painting sealed in a vault. You do not expose it to sunlight instantly. Sometimes the smartest and safest place for an ancient structure is exactly where the builders left it. The next time you look at a photograph of Göbekli Tepe, look past the few standing pillars and the wooden walkways. Focus on the untouched grass and the plain soil just beyond the excavation walls. Underneath that ground are dozens of stone circles and hundreds of carved pillars that no one alive has ever seen. The world's oldest monumental sanctuary is not a finished discovery. It is an archive of human effort, preserved completely by accident because your ancestors cared enough to bury it. Right now, beneath that quiet hill, an entire world is still sleeping in the dark. It is waiting for the slow, careful work of the future to bring it back into the light.